Today, we're talking about masculinity in America today, asking whether the concept of be a man has resulted in the rejection of traits we've feminized in our culture, like caring, compassion, and empathy. We'd love for you to join the conversation by calling us at 415-663-8492. And the reason that I wanted to bring this conversation up is that this definition, perhaps distorted definition, may be putting our boys and men and society in general in peril. The concept of masculinity in the American psyche is often equated with stoicism, dominance, violence, and emotional repression. And this is supported and magnified in sports, film, TV, and video games. And here's a shocking fact. 3 or more boys are committing suicide every day in America. And the question is, has the rejection of traits like caring, compassion, and empathy resulted in isolation, desperation, and in many cases, rage and violence? Has the clarion call of to be a man taken to the extreme where young men lose their connection to themselves and to each other? Has this contributed to the staggering amount of violence against women? Boys are in crisis in America. They're 2 times more likely than girls to flunk or drop out of school. They're 2 times more likely to receive special education. They're 4 times more likely to be expelled. 93% of boys are exposed to internet porn before the age of 18. Only 22 states require public schools to teach sex ed, so they're getting their information here. Has this disconnect also contributed to their views toward women? We don't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them prove it all the time, over and over again. There are no manhood rights in this culture except perhaps the military, but here too it's a flawed right as it doesn't acknowledge the transcendent aspect of manhood. This results in the wearing of a mask, posturing like those around them, missing what they really want, which is perhaps connection and closeness and community. Often once boys hit high school, it's hard to find people to talk to because you're not supposed to ask for help. If you're never allowed to cry, to always man up, feelings are stuffed and often turn to rage. Some feel like outcasts and look for trouble, look for fights. Many end up acting out, being aggressive, which is often seen as a conduct disorder or just a bad kid, never seeing the suffering underneath it all. And does this maybe shed light on the extreme violence toward women that is everywhere?
Well, Mary, I'm so delighted you put out this challenging subject. It's challenging for me because as a male, I don't ever remember talking about this issue with other men.
Wow.
we men definitely are conditioned differently in our society than females are. And from boyhood through young adolescence, even older, et cetera, there's so many pressures. And there's no question that the negative results that you gave us statistics about, the suicides. And it's clear that we're not functioning as well as we probably could. But, what it is that we have to do to change that may seem simple at one level, but I've come to believe and see that it's extremely complex at another level. And I think one place we need to start is kind of what do boys really experience growing up that leads them to violence, what leads them. And I think you touched a lot of those issues. And I think men are struggling with trying to allow their feminine side to be done as well. But the pressures of growing up in the society, I think we should talk a little bit about on boys and men.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe
because
you
it's
could
intense.
Yeah, because I'm not a boy. I was never a boy. So were you aware of that at what age did you become aware of that?
Well, as soon as I could think, I guess. It's like, I'm a boy, I should be watching what men do because that's what I'm going to become, and what is it that's valued about being a man. And I remember at a young age, we were immigrants from Germany and Canada, and we'd have other German folks over and have a big meal, and after the meal, the men would congregate one place and the women would congregate another place. And of course, I wanted to sit with the men. And what I heard the men talking about is, they talked about war. They talked about sort of political things, being in control, etc. And they would put down women. I noticed that very early on, that they felt a superiority to women, where if a woman would say something, it would come into this circle. It's like, isn't that silly? They believe that. And they created a differentiation, is that's what women do. They're emotional, and that's why we're in charge. So there was a clear cultural understanding that the man had to take some responsibility. It wasn't an education about being equal or being respectful. It was an education about how to exert and exercise that dominance. And really, I saw it as in men, pecking order is very important, maybe in women too, I don't know. But in men, I can see it's often based on physical strength, on financial success, power and money, and all those things are what determine pecking order in men. And that competitive nature helped shape me, I believe.
Well, I think it's interesting to say that to note that the conversation inadvertently was always putting women down.
Yes.
And, that's something that women, young girls, have to live through.
I wouldn't say inadvertently. I think it was quite deliberate.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I think men took some pride in being the superior sex, at least in my experience growing up amongst my father and their friends. And that's the world I knew. And it got reinforced everywhere. So if I go out in society, men have the more important jobs. Men are running things more than women. It has obviously changed. And over my lifetime, I've witnessed our culture changed. I've changed in how I tried to raise my kids, and then how I see them raising their kids, my grandkids. There's a shift. There's a shift in our society.
But there's also a shift to the other extreme in the super alpha, dysfunctional male rising to power, where that was the most important thing. They would run roughshod over everybody. You'd see it in CEOs. You'd see it in government.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, I'd like to acknowledge Paul and Donna's book on Seduction Redefined, because it shined some light on this for me in a way that I had never really seen before. And one of the things they did was that they studied maleness and femaleness as an animal, and they studied that in nature. And what they found was that females of other species tend not to choose mates with traits that will endanger genetic survival. I'm quoting now. Since humans are at the top of the predator chain and the greatest dangers to our species, ourselves, and our actions, men's runaway traits of aggression and destruction are now endangering our species and all others. Yet in a male-dominator society, those tend to be behaviors that are rewarded. They are encouraged to intensify by making women believe that these are the desirable traits to be passed down to their sons. It didn't used to be like that. When men presented or males presented and postured, they would pick surely the strong and the true and the one, but they would also pick the gentle and the tender and the kind one.
When was that? Because you say it wasn't always that way. I mean, it's the only world I know.
Well, yeah. But, we've been under a patriarchy for a very long time.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I can't give you the exact date, but it's been a long time. But Paul and Donna's point were that if women are actually in a position, if a man is truly functional, firing on all his cylinders, like the head of the wolf pack. The original studies on wolves, where they were always fighting the other males, but when I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he wrote the book Wolf, and when he studied wolves who were actually in naturally forming packs, which consisted of his mate, who was a partner, and his children. He would fiercely defend the pack, but he was also, daddy, and played with the kids and was gentle and kind. And as we've distorted this and diluted women's choosing their mate by their innate original instincts for all of the wonderful traits of masculinity, and as they were disempowered and feminine power was diluted or demeaned, they began to choose the male definition of what is a true and powerful male. And then we slipped into this distortion. I think this is a huge point and is at the root of much of what we see today.
Well, one of the roots is that I'm not sure we males understand female coreness and norms and stuff as much, and I don't think women really understand men underneath their mask as much as exists. But I want to point to a book that was just handed to me by a neighbor where we used to live here in Point Reyes, Hathaway Berry. She did a great study of boys from ages 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 20, and then talked to men in all age groups. And in the book shows the quotes from those men, giving kind of what decade their age is in, and then presents it around a set of questions of a woman listening to men and boys. In fact, her name of the book is Boy, a Woman Listening to Men and Boys. And I want to go right to the very last thing that she says in the book. What have I learned? What do I know now? Mostly how little I know. Nothing suddenly solved. Glorious, messy, unfigure-outable life. For me, it's more about undoing and unlearning, wearing out of a lot of my ideas and assumptions, leaving more room for not knowing, and for seeing beautiful boys and men freshly as they are. Everywhere I go now, I see men differently. And I would suggest that if you're interested in this topic, it's a brand new book, and you can go to the website of listeningtomen.com to order one. And it's not yet in our local bookstore, but maybe if you ask Steve Costa or Kate Levinson that you'd like to get a copy of that book, they'll be able to carry it. So it for me, allowed me to see that what I've sort of kept to myself. And we have another co-host here in the studio today. Hi, Charles Schultz. There you go.
Welcome, Charles.
Well, forgive me, I've forgotten our anniversary. What are we discussing today?
Masculinity.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Do you know anything about masculinity?
Surprisingly little. But thank you so much for having me on. I'm standing in here for Paul Raffel. Masculinity is a fascinating topic. I mean, it's something I think men think about all the time, and and look at that. Someone is called. I grew up in the industrial Midwest, and I thought of, and I actually made a documentary about it, the idea of the city or the economy or the politics of the Cold War in an industrial city like Flint, Michigan, as a sort of absent father. There was a sort of missing character in that world, and I made a documentary about how my brother constructed his masculinity. We didn't know our father very well, out of the relationships to his friends' fathers and things like that, and how every man sort of puts themselves together. And for some people it's very obvious because they have a very strong relationship with their father, but people who don't, and then also this other idea of this absence in the culture, it's how do people invent that? How do people make it up?
Well, I'm so glad you accepted the invitation to be here today, Charles, and that we have a second man in the studio here, and I don't feel all this pressure to talk about malehood from my limited experience.
I will be the sacrificial
male.
Yes.
So, hi, caller. What's your name, please?
Oh, hi, folks. This is Charlie. How you doing?
Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
Thanks for calling.
Three of you. I think that, it really is kind of odd when one puts the question up, what is masculinity? We can talk about what's considered to be and how we learned and what we were rewarded for doing as kids. But I think you hit upon something when you talked about, you made a reference to puberty rights. In a lot of societies, there's something that people do when they're teenagers or maybe a little older, and if they go through the crucible of whatever it is they have to do, and I know that in some societies women do also, when their cycles start, men sometimes have to endure pain or something. You were right about, in the world I grew up in, I was born in 1948, it seemed like you had to go to war to prove yourself. That was your puberty right, to go as a male, to go into the army and endure something terrible and then come out of it. And I think that, that really changed a lot as a lot of people decided that they didn't like the idea of going to war so much. But I think one of the things that I find out, or that I've grown up with and paid attention to, because I used to work on a hotline for abusive men, and I talked to a lot of guys that were trying not to be abusive, who had the hell beat out of them when they were growing up. But it's just this idea that you end up deciding for yourself, what your gender definition is, and it's a big question.
It is, and when you don't have the manhood rights or the womanhood rights, you're kind of left to look at your peer group, which is basically at the mercy of the cultural conditioning rather than perhaps. I'm hearing feedback here.
Charlie, is your phone on?
Yeah, my phone's on, but...
Oh, I'm sorry, because your radio on.
Is that better?
Well,
Yeah,
I think,
much better.
I think war is a really important thing to talk
The way
about.
we pleased our dad, not that he demanded this, was to learn how to play baseball. And that was something we shared with him. He took us to the games, and, he used to take us out and teach us the game. And luckily, we both liked baseball anyway. But that was kind of an innocent little way to please Dad. And
Charlie, isn't sports in some ways for many boys the rite of passage? And in that process, as you were saying, even there, aren't you told often, just walk it off. You got hit, toughen it out, forget about it. Don't express the pain. Boys don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. All that kind of stuff. Isn't that a conditioning that we've all experienced as kids?
Well, specifically for myself, and I did well enough in baseball to play up through the semi-professional leagues. And at that time when I was growing up, women's sports really were not encouraged that much. Now it's much different. But I was what they call a middle infielder. I played second base or shortstop. And on the double plays where you take the ball and step on the base and throw it to first, the runner coming from first can...
They take you out.
Now, hold on a second, Charlie. We're trying to talk about masculinity, and we've actually got a caller who's describing how to deal with the double play. Is that? Am I right in this, Charles?
That was, the thing was, and there were rules against doing it in an illegal way, but the ump would stand there and say, just... rub it off. Don't worry about it.
Well, that's, I think, one of the key problems that Bernie was talking about as well, that where do you go with your feelings? Boys are conditioned to stuff it. Do not share. Do not ask for help. If everything's going great, fine, you can talk to your mates. But when things are not going well and you need to connect with somebody, there's often they feel there's no place to go. I've heard this over and over again. As a teacher and as a mother and as a friend, where do they go with these feelings?
But isn't that a universal culture? I mean, aren't women in the same position in some way too?
Not quite as much, because women talk to each other. They will talk. Guys tend to go off, and when they went off on the hunt, that was cool because they could express their feelings that way. But women actually solve their problems by talking to each other way more than men. Men are much more guarded about that. And
Charlie, what are you doing?
Well, don't you have a passage you want to read here, Bernie?
I'm just walking up and down the corridor in the kitchen here.
I think more than sports, we need to talk about war. I mean, the world that I was born into, there was this intense trauma that came out of the Second World War, couldn't be talked about. And when I think about domestic violence and things like that, I think about how all of these damaged men came back from the Second World War, and then a second wave of them came back from the Vietnam War, and there was no way to process or talk about all of that. And I think it was sublimated into violence in the home and violence toward their people in their lives, their children, et cetera.
That's certainly a factor, but then why is there war? What is this alpha mask male that is so pervasive in our culture, which is like win at all costs Superman, and that is an easy image for it's attractive to adolescents who are looking for identity, and it just keeps perpetuating the very destructive behaviors. And there's no question that men coming back from war have tremendous issues and challenges.
Well, I don't think the media helps at all because, even in something everybody tripped out on like Star Wars, it always comes down to the good guy. And now, the take on Hollywood for feminism is now that she's got a gun, right?
Yeah, which isn't
the way the good
but
guy
that's
or the
totally
good gal wins is they have a bigger gun or a more powerful gun, or they're more violent to subdue the quote-unquote bad guy.
Well, here I want to quote Donna and Paul's book again when they say, perhaps it's time for the beta revolution, where the beta is the new alpha, where cooperation is more important than making it to the top, and the precautionary principle is valued more than success at any price. Perhaps we can no longer endure the alpha mask behavior that endangers us all, and we have to begin to make the mindful man and true partnership between the sexes the essential paradigm. Because once there is that true partnership, which we haven't had yet in this world.
We have to learn how to talk to each other. I mean, if you're a man or a woman, we have to be able to learn how to sit down in sensitivity and mutual respect and tell each other who we are.
Yeah, and for women, when they start picking men where kindness and mindfulness are sexy, it can change the gene pool.
Charlie, I want to thank you so much for calling in and giving your perspective. That's what we're about in this show, and I want to thanks. Bye, Charlie.
Yeah, I hope you guys get lots of calls. Thank you.
There's a better Charlie in Marshall. I just want to point out.
So let me remind folks that you're listening to Let's Talk Radio with host Mary Frank, Charles Schultz, who's filling in today, and I'm Bernie Steffen. But please call us on 415-663-8492 and tell us if you believe today's male gender identity has become increasingly complex and confusing or not. I believe it is. But we've got a lot of good ideas here in the studio, but we most want to hear from you, the audience, with your take on this subject.
Well, and this topic of alpha masks and beta masks, I actually really enjoyed that part of Donna Sheehan and Paul Raffel's writing. I think that we don't talk enough about complementarity. And what we've created is, let me be controversial. I think that's why I'm here.
What was that word you said, complementaria?
Complementarity. The way in which people are not the same, but how they become greater than themselves. And this,
1 + 1 is 3?
Perhaps.
Okay.
But forget complementarity. Pardon me. The way in which, my controversial statement, and I can have as many of these as we have time for. Second wave feminism, right, proved that you could take a woman and make her into the worst kind of man that our culture produces.
Just what we need.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so this is a misunderstanding, I think, of but we're talking about masculinity. Why am I criticizing second wave feminism? I'm saying that public world of men, women were pushed into, or decided they wanted to participate in without really understanding what the coordinates of it were. And so
a lot of women are participating in our patriarchy just because women rise to the top. Let's say we get a president who's a woman. That doesn't mean
by those behaviors, those same alpha mask behaviors.
It doesn't automatically mean we're now not a patriarchy, a matriarchy. We're going to stay a patriarchy as long as our cultural definitions of male and female are as they are, and that there's built in with men a competitiveness and a rising to the top, and women much more of a cooperation, collaboration view.
Well, I'd say men retreated. I mean, one example, and I'm surprised with boomer men. I guess Bernie, you're probably a boomer.
I'm a boomer.
Yeah, that after the civil rights movement, which you have to understand, it was something that would not have happened with one of the favorite presidents in West Marin, LBJ. Everybody loves him so much. It would not have happened, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, without all of these white racist guys in the Congress and the president, who was a monster in many ways, getting together and making that happen legislatively. Blacks could have marched till their feet fell off. It would not have happened with those guys. And I think that there was a kind of retreat that I saw in the boomers in my own family, the men, from politics, from public life. They left. After the 60s and the early 70s, they said, okay, well, I'm going to go to the suburbs. I'm not going to participate anymore. So there's a weird, in our culture, men no longer feel like they have a public role or that their public participation is important, that it's defining for them. I think that they should feel that way. I think they should get involved. And so my what I would be upset with masculinity would be to say that where are these men in the public sphere? They left. They left 50 years ago, and they haven't come back.
We for a while had an Alan Alda that women admired, who was that sensitive actor, male character, etc. And so this is the new masculinity we're looking for, But I don't know that there's enough Alan Aldas around. Mary, you said something earlier that for me said, yes, where's all this violence coming from? I think it's the repression of the anger that we feel when we're told to suck it in.
I think it's going to come out somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's been going on for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And Charles, I think you were giving examples in history of changes at that macro level, and I agree with that. I think one of the macro changes I see is that as we've gotten television, as we've gotten sort of more centralized focus on national and global, there isn't that much room for men to exercise that expectation of being in control of something or being a leader in something. And so there are less and less opportunities for men to fill that traditional role of being, like if you can't be the head of your household anymore because women are now equal, what am I supposed to do with all the stuff I've been conditioned for when I was a kid?
Learn true partnership. Learn true partnership.
Don't give me an answer that quickly as a woman, please.
Because
that's what you guys are doing. Is you're blaming us.
No, I'm not blaming. The women are just, listen, the women who took over in the macho role, I said, just now we have macho men and macho women. I experienced the same thing. I'm one of the people that brought you the 60s. And I was horrified. I said, no, those aren't the qualities that we want. We want the women qualities of cooperation and collaboration, and which is not to diminish. I mean, we need the men to go out and fight for us and protect us and do all of the things. I know that is, but how are we defining fighting? How are we defining protecting? Men will die for us, but women ask the question, what do we live for? And you need both.
Yeah, well,
both.
I absolutely agree. But I would say what you've identified is actually that interplay, the Spartan women. Where are women during all of these wars? Well, they're saying protect the house, but and your family. So there's this sort of weird thing that happens where men have all of this sort of laid upon them that they are the source of all of this negativity within the culture, all of this destruction within the culture. When in fact that is a part of an interplay as well.
Oh, absolutely. No, the women. Listen, the women made a big big mistake by choosing the wrong guys. It's like if you have those.
To all my ex-girlfriends out there, go on, Mary.
No, but if what a woman chooses, women used to be allowed to choose their mates. Again, this is Paul and Donna.
What do you mean used to? Now they don't?
Well, they're choosing them, but we have a call.
Line 1, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
My name's Frederick.
Oh, dear.
Hi, Frederick.
And I would like to ask a question of Mary Frank, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mary, my row is with the chronology of history, I see all sorts of insidious women.
They're true. There's bad guys on both sides.
And I only knew Donna Sheehan for, 6 years or so, but the first time I ran into her down to the station house, and she was trying to explain the difference to me about men and women by taking her finger and poking it into a glass, and that men had been penetrating the lives of and destroying the lives of people through, I think, as the topic you discussed today, masculinity. But my row is not with man per se or woman per se, but this notion that you touched on just a moment ago a little bit, that women, if playing the role of patriarchy, are, I think, quite honestly, because they do have a natural tendency to seek power, whereas man has a natural tendency to seek pleasure, they are more capable of destruction, and we're seeing that in this current election cycle, no doubt, than any man ever could have wished. And I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Well, I think you have a point, but I don't think there's one who's more destructive than the other or one is more to blame. I think that this has been the outcome of a cultural phenomenon that has ended up worshiping traits that are aimed at our destruction and the destruction of the planet. And that if we don't turn that around in collaborative partnership, men and women working together and loving each other for who they are and for their differences and their gifts, we are circling the drain, and we're going to go right down.
Mary,
the answer.
We have to talk about this on some level. We have a show about masculinity.
Yeah.
We have callers calling in talking about women.
Yeah.
What I mean, I know
but this
you
is
need
very
to talk about both.
But this is very typical of what happens. I mean, if you're a woman, you deal with this kind of stuff every single day. We don't have to go off to war to be abused. We get it here every single day.
But we have a caller.
The soccer World Cup with the women is a total joke.
Hold on.
No, it's not a joke. I love that sport.
But hold on, caller. Do you have anything to say about masculinity? I don't. You seem to be talking about women all the time. This is a show about masculinity.
No, but they're intertwined. There's a link there. But we have a caller, and
No, we're not done with Frederick at all. You'd like to move on because he challenged you.
No, but did I answer your question, caller?
I accept that, Mary, but we have to have a kind of a meeting of the minds on having a systemic change.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to quote Paul and Donna here. When they talk about the differences, while men focus, women multitask. While men obsess over details and facts, women consider side effects and use intuition and empathy. The functional feminine knows how to nurture, protect, and provide for the nest, whether that be at home or the greater community. It is emotional. It is visceral. It's comforting. It offers comfort, pleasure, and warmth. So there's the value of the feminine there. There's the value. And so if that is respected and women can pick those traits, nurturing traits as well as protective traits in men, we can have true partnership, and it won't be who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. But we have big problems to solve.
And with women, it's not just about who they have sex with. With women, it's that they are the mothers of the little boys.
Yeah.
And when they are the mothers of the little boys, and by the way, in this book that I mentioned called Boy, A Woman Listening to Men and Boys by Hathaway Barry, our own here from Point Reyes Station, she has a chapter, If Men Are Going to Change, Women Have to Allow It. And there is this notion that is talked about where a mother may keep saying to her boy, when somebody hits you, you don't hit back. You recognize that they're in some kind of pain or whatever that they're dealing with. And so the proper thing to do is be understanding, don't escalate the violence, don't do it. But then when she sees it out on the baseball field and some boy is bullying her boy, if he happens to hit that boy back, there's a surge of pride. So there is this duplicity that we all learn.
Well,
we learn.
It's not duplicity. You have to hit a bully back. If if you're being bullied, you got to hit him back, because if you don't, they're going to bully you forever.
I would just suggest that as much as we encourage the young man to play baseball or some sort of sport, we would encourage him to play with dolls as well.
I disagree.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
Understanding, and it would also prevent this insidious hormone treatment that people are getting for their children now and turning them into...
turning into what? We don't know.
We don't know. Anyway, I will leave you now. Thank you so much for a wonderful program. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you bringing up this very penetrating issue.
Penetrating issue. Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Caller, are you circumcised?
Sure.
That was a different show we did, Charles. We've already done that.
That's another show.
Frederick, thank you so much. Bye-bye. So, the other caller that was on that we didn't get to in time, please call back.
Oh, yeah, please.
We now have both lines open. And, we're really getting into something that's very fundamental here, this definition. And we do have a caller, so let me just see. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Oh, this is Anthony Wright.
Hey, Anthony, thanks so much for calling in. Yeah. Well, I thought we'd have only women call in, but all the men are calling in. This is wonderful.
It is wonderful. A place to talk.
On the next room, I said that you wanted to take a call. So, but I thought I would say Hathaway Berry actually interviewed me for the book Boy. And the thing that was really striking to me about her interview was her very first question to me was, what do you want women to know? And I think it was, as a man, what do you want women to know? And I fell on the floor laughing for about 5 minutes, because no woman had ever asked me that question before, and has not asked me that question since.
So, Anthony, are you willing to reveal what your answer was?
Oh, well, it was kind of long-winded, but...
we have some time.
It was actually to I guess, be aware of our gender differences. I don't exactly remember what it was that I said, other than I laughed my head off when she asked that question, out of relief, actually.
Yeah.
Of someone who actually wanted to know.
What about masculinity did you want to explain? What did you want to say as a man that you thought that she wouldn't know as a woman?
Well, that we're different, and vive la différence, and I guess the thing is also for women not to, and for men too, not to make assumptions about the other sex and about what we think we know about each other may not actually be the case.
Yeah, that's where communication...
Not something that we can get unless we're very deeply attuned to the other client, or the other person. Not something we can get telepathically.
No, and I think that's where communication comes in. True listening, true respect develops true partnership.
Well, let me be controversial here. I'm going to suggest that actually women and men know exactly who the other person is, but that we live in such a destructive culture that idea of partnership, complementarity was the word I used, is impossible. And so even though that there is a very basic and immediate understanding, men are raised by women, women are raised by men, they do know who the other one is. It's just impossible in a culture like ours to actually work together.
Why?
It's a competitive society.
But who has the power to remove that competition?
Well, but it becomes very perverse. I mean, I think of Germaine Greer talking about the fact that the women's rights movement, the capitalists just wanted them in the workplace to suppress wages and to create another realm of competition so that they could make more money. They exploited women, but women saw that as they're gaining a right or gaining power. power, or
well, again, that was a swing of the pendulum to the other side too far. We've got to come into central, and we do have the power because we have consciousness. And
one of the things I'd like to offer, if I may, is I guess I have to disagree in that we know, as men, we know exactly what women want. I don't live in a female body. I don't know what it is to have a hormone cycle like a woman. I can certainly, as an informed human being, dedicate myself, and which I have, to a life study of what a person's experience is in a different polarity body that has different hormonal makeup. And I think the converse is true. And I think also I want to talk about the archetypal opposite sex. So I have an internal feminine inside me that has stood me in very good stead in helping me understand women, but and also helping me come to a better and more thoughtful and compassionate understanding of who I am as a man, being involved and have a polarity that is a spark to someone. And I guess one of the things, and I'd like everybody to comment on this, one of the things that I've heard that women find most attractive in a man is a guy that has confidence. And what are your guys' comments on that? But when a guy has real confidence and compassion, is that attractive?
I think we are conditioned to have to fake knowledge about everything. You know, the idea.
I don't have to fake it, Bernie.
No, but the idea that we won't ask for directions, I think, is an example of that. So I think that indeed this idea of men having confidence is about that we know we deserve to be the superior sex.
But this is alpha mask territory,
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
which is that you this false confidence, and if you learn to fake it, well, I mean, it obtains in our culture clearly.
Well, I'm talking about a vulnerable confidence here too. Well, okay.
Anthony, your line goes in and out, and I think I really appreciate you calling.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll let you go.
We're going to say goodbye. Thanks so much. Do call again.
Thank you, Anthony.
So I would like to take a stab. No, there's another call. I'd like to take a stab at the question of what do you want women to know? And what I wanted when I was younger. Right now, I don't care what women think so much. I'm just kidding. But when I was a young man, and I felt like women are expressing their needs and their sorrow and all that, I don't think I felt an appreciation for the tremendous pressure that this stereotype or this norm of masculinity was on a male to earn the sufficient income, to provide, to make the woman feel good, to do all these things that we were conditioned to be in charge of. So expectations played a heavy weight on me, and I think it does on a lot of men, and I think the masks we put on hide that, and so that's not a healthy thing emotionally, but I think that makes us feel that women don't really understand us at a deep level.
Yes,
and so we're really scared, we're afraid to reveal that underside of fear and faking it or whatever, and therefore it's hard for us to have that intimacy. Mm-hmm. And then when we have that, we desperately seek that intimacy, mm-hmm. and we want women we can trust that isn't going to be laughed at or discounted or whatever.
It has an epistemic effect in the culture, which is that self-doubt, which is a beautiful luxury. You should allow yourself to be unsure of the things that you believe and the things that you think about. This desire always to be confident interrupts that ability to doubt yourself. And so it's a way of cutting off, I think, thought. I'd also say, and I'm really upset with myself to bring this back to women, although you can't have a conversation about men without women, I suppose, is that women are certainly the enforcers of the Protestant work ethic. They're the ones saying, where's the house? Where's the expensive education for our children? Where's the, all of those things? But I'd like to get...
Yeah, but those qualities have also been programmed into the woman. And perhaps she feels those things more importantly because she doesn't have the communication with her partner, because there isn't kindness and gentleness in their relationship. So the material things become more important because the soul things aren't being fed by either of them.
I don't see lots of people with souls at all out there. I mean, I see.
There's your work.
Well, yeah, I mean,
there's your homework.
Well, but it's a life entirely mediated when we get down to it by material.
No, change begins with you. And when
it's already begun.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mary.
We have a caller. Let's take the caller.
Great.
So, caller, what's your name, please? You're on the air.
It's Lions.
Oh, hi there.
Hi, Lions. Are you coming to our rescue?
I'm trying desperately to get on the air. So many calls.
We were having too much fun, too.
Lock the door, Bernie.
Well, I find it very difficult to talk in the generalities and philosophical concepts.
So what specifically would you like to say about Gregory?
You said, Bernie used the word expectations, and that's what I wanted to talk about was my own father. He and his father were both quite unhappy men, which had a number of repercussions in our family, but more to the point was they were expected to be a certain kind of man. It was partly their family, it was partly cultural, partly class, but they were unhappy. They were not who they wanted to be, and that had terrible repercussions in my family. Mm-hmm. So I think focusing on supporting people in who they are is how I can approach.
Do you think today's giving more attention to the LGBTQ community is helping to make that bridge to show that there's a greater variety within the male sex and the female sex that we've defined as a male and female gender?
Yeah, you brought up Ellen Alda. Let's talk about David Bowie and Prince.
Oh, dear.
They blurred those lines as well.
Do I have to say this correctly? Lions, your grandfather was gay.
Nothing about sexuality in particular.
Well, no, I think that's right.
They are as people, and that they weren't able to be themselves, and neither of them was a strong character who'd say, well, the hell with everybody, I'm going to go out and do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. They didn't, as it happened, have that quality. But it's that whenever we have an idea of how you should be, how an organization should be, it has to come organically from who the person is.
Can I give an example of this, and I'll do this as briefly as I can, and Bernie may stab me with a pen, so if you hear us shouting. He's raised his hand. The problem is with after the Second World War, essentially what the American government said to the whole country, and this Cold War mentality said, you can have a nice life and you can have houses and cars and all of this money and things like that, but what you can't do is participate in the questions about how resources are going to be used, questions about what the military is going to do or not do. Those things are all cut off to you. And I would go back to the root of the word virtue, virtus or virtus, if you take that evil path of pronouncing it as not in the classical school, but or not in the ecclesiastical school, but the classical school. Sorry, that is really a digression.
Masculinity.
What virtus is the quality of being a man. Yeah. So what these men had no avenue was to express virtue. They couldn't be virtuous because the government had, in effect, said to the whole country in a very powerful way. And the people who did try and resist, of course, we could talk about COINTELPRO, we could talk about all these things, they were crushed. But that we have a situation in which that the idea of expressing virtue is not allowed. And that is a fundamental, I think, quality of public male life that has just been interrupted. And
I think we can only address it by one life at a time, all happening together. But I can't make a body of people change their minds, but I can perhaps impact my brother, for instance, when he says to his son, who expressed anxiety, "What do you have to be anxious about?"
Lions,
in fact, my nephew has a better life than my brother did in terms of having a good father. But, here he is passing on some of those ideas.
Lyons, you touched on something I'd like to speak to, and that is what others' expectations for you are. I think that's a huge pressure that I know many boys feel, and you expressed it about your father and grandfather, and I so appreciate that. I hate using this or seeing this expression used. There's one of the presidential candidates that talks about everybody having the God-given right to live up to their potential. Well, why is it always other people determining what your potential is, as opposed to we each being allowed to fulfill what we feel comes naturally?
We have a caller.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lyons.
So, hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Got a lot of people from Marshall today.
Paul from Marshall.
Pardon me.
Yes, hi, Paul. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, and I'm going to make my statement and then hang up because I know you're really short on time.
Oh, you're just being a coward.
That too. I'm not really an alpha.
You want to be a sissy boy? Come on.
What I see masculinity as part of the chimpanzee model, if you will, as opposed to the other apes that are...
The bonobo model?
Yes. That you can only have one real alpha, and when you base your society on hierarchy and centralization, what you get is frustration. You have a lot of beta males that would like to be alpha that cannot display their masculinity, and therefore they take out their frustration on those weaker than them.
Well, look at the elk in the park. There's a way to bring it back around to our own locality. All of the betas just sit in a pile over there, and then there's one alpha hanging out with the girls.
But that's right. He's got a harem.
the Grand Turk is there. Do you have more to say on that point, caller? But we don't want to lose you.
Well, we've detoured into horniness enough.
Paul, I appreciate what you're pointing to. I think of it in terms of the idea that we've become more centralized, more globalized, and there's fewer opportunities for there to be alpha males. That the ones that get worshipped are on TV. This idea that Andy Warhol talked about, everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame, I think underlies that idea that desperately we as boys want to find where we can make our mark, and the opportunity's been diminished.
I would do with 5 minutes.
Well, hold on. What I want to say very, very quickly, because it addresses this confusion about gender and sexuality and what we're talking about, is that I think what arose in the 1980s in the world that we live in is a neoliberal world, is a world in which there is a marketplace, and that your identity is about a call and response in between yourself and what the market wants to see. And so all of this confusion comes from the fact that we're now decentered people. We don't have any conception of who we are, what we're doing.
Well, I want to thank our listeners and our callers today for your participation. I hope you'll turn in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.